It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Meche, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Welcome to Smoker Broker Radio. I'm Robert Meche, and I am the Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday to you. Cruising along to the weekend. Hope you've had a good week so far. Been nice so far. The weather's changed. It's looking nicer outside. It's getting a little bit cooler. Halloween was kind of cool. It's nice to see it for a regular Halloween where we weren't at 100 or so something degrees. As always, got my crew around with me. I don't like being alone when I'm on the radio, so I bring some of my agents with me. Got David Tung next to my side here, Miss Banu Hanavera. Mark Cox has been with me a while. Our special guest, Mr. Martin Cooley. Back behind the glass, Mr. Mark Warner. He runs the station. He owns the whole place. So he keeps us streaming live from coast to coast, live without limits. And we are going to be talking about inspections today. Probably one of the most difficult pieces of the real estate transaction. Before I get into that, had a great week down there with the folks in Austin. Small World Realty moves from all of North Texas down into Central Texas and into Austin. Enjoyed working with the people down there. I know some of you guys are out there watching the show this week that we talked to, so hello. It was good seeing you all this week. I hope you guys enjoy the show. So in the inspection process, or in the real estate process in general, most people would think that the negotiations are the most difficult piece. Getting where we're negotiating with an offer, we come in, we're off, it's higher, lower than we want it to be. We spend all this time going back and forth, and some people would say that that's probably the most difficult part of this process. I would argue that that's nothing compared to going through inspection and negotiating repairs. There's just so much unknown to a lot of the people out there, and agents included, as to what should we ask for, what should we do, what should we be looking for, what's a concern to us. There's so much breakdown in the process that it makes the negotiation process very difficult for the general public and for agents alike. Now, we've talked about, there's been some shows that we've breached the subject of inspections where we talk a little bit about it. And you notice on Smoker Broker Radio, we go across the real estate boards where we're looking at everything that happens in real estate. So, if we go in order, every single show it kind of repeats itself with one thing after the next from the first section, and we'd be talking about the same topic for like 5 or 6 shows. So you'll find that we move back and forth amongst the subjects, but we always come back to where we stopped off at the last time. And in this particular case, that's exactly what we're doing. We are going to get back into inspections and talk more in depth about what our issues are here. So let's talk about how we've got to the process. What are the things that have happened so far that we're at the inspection? David, you talked so much last time on the show. How about you start us off? What is just name some of the things? Get your hand down. What are some of the things we talked about, or what are some things we get to before? So we've talked about a contract, right? So we negotiated it.
Yeah.
What's the important process from a timeline on the inspection? What's one of the first things that we're going to tell that buyer to do when they're getting?
We're basically going to schedule inspection as soon as possible.
That's
if
right.
possible, if the contract is executed, this evening.
Right.
I'm calling inspector on behalf of them, or they have to contact inspector right away.
Right.
And hopefully to get somebody in tomorrow.
Now, Mark, what's the reason?
Day.
Why is it that we're telling them that we want an inspection to be ordered ASAP?
Because we usually have about 7 days on the option period.
That's
so
right.
We want to do the inspection within the first 3 days if possible.
That's right. We want to get it. And Benu, if we're doing it so early in the process, what is the reasoning behind that? Why do we want them in early in from once we negotiated the contract?
Because in my experience, all the inspectors are super busy.
That's right. They're busy.
And so hard to get them on a calendar. So it's better to get them on there quickly and we
then
have
once
time.
and then once you get them on the contract, what's the other worry that we have as far as once we do, let's say we do an inspection on day 3 or 4, what's our next biggest concern?
Repairs negotiation.
Yeah. Do these take like 5 minutes sometimes? No. Yeah.
It's a process.
It's a process. That's the best way to describe it. It is a process, and we're not sure where it's going to lead us. You know, the review process. We could have something as simple as, you know, an air conditioner needs to be serviced. You know, that's not a problem. We all agree that, hey, the air conditioner needs to work. But the more difficult topics, and we'll talk more about this as we go through today, but like the roof.
Exactly.
You know, if the roof has got some type of hail damage on it and we are under the impression it might need to be replaced, we're not the ones who make that call. And even if a professional roofer comes out and tells us that it needs to be replaced, we still have another step in the fact that we've got to get the
Call
insurance adjuster.
company,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, you know, if we have an adjuster go out there, we could be talking about another week or so. And God forbid it's during storm season. I mean, we've been pushed off for a month or so.
Yep.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about how those things push through. So we get to where we want to do this early. We call the inspector. We bring someone in like Mr. Cooley in there. You know, Martin's been in the business for a long time. He is a veteran real estate inspector, and he's going to share with us some of the things that we come across. And we're going to join in with him because we really are a shared team as these things go through. You know, these are independent. Inspectors are totally independent of what we do, but we have to be on the same wavelength as what we're trying to accomplish. And he wants to make sure that he tells the buyer exactly what's wrong with the house, and he's going to do it exactly like the Texas Real Estate Commission tells him to. He's gonna even put things on there that he probably is like, look, this is just not that important, but we want you as a buyer to be aware that it's out there. So he's going to go through and do that, but he's also going to try to balance how he explains it. And that's where we come in, to where we're going to tell or advise our buyers as to what we think they should probably be asking for. And after his conversations with them, we hope those conversations merge together. It does not always work like that, and that's part of the difficulties we're going to discuss. But the other side of this, it's not just the buyer that we're concerned about. We have a seller that's going to be asked to fix some things in their house, and we have to prepare them for what are some of those repairs going to be. And that's where it gets touchy, because you're asking the seller to fix something that they've been living in the house for quite some time, and maybe they're not so concerned about it. And that's what's going to really drive this conversation today, is that where does the seller feel like they have to fix it? You know, I'll give a little bit of a teaser to that conversation, is the fact that when an inspector tells us the electric panel is outdated, or it's some will even go as far as to say it's a safety hazard, which people just love to hear that the electric is a safety hazard, because all they picture is their house going up in flames. When it rarely happens, it does not happen very often. But if you tell a buyer that it's a safety hazard on the panel, it is common sense to them. Oh, we're going to have to fix that.
Right.
It might seem like it's common sense, but you know, you have to look at it from the seller's standpoint. They've been there for quite some time. There hadn't been any fires, and as far as they're concerned, it's all right. You might even have some electricians that tell you, hey, if you mess with that box, you really might screw it up even worse than it already is. So we have some really conflicting things that happen as we go in there. So, Martin, let's walk through. Tell me just some basic stuff. Let's talk about when you come into the home. What's your conversation with the buyer as far as what you're going to do for them? We're certainly I could talk about all your tasks, but give us just a brief intro, and we're going to kind of join in on some of the conversations that feed from you there.
Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you. It's a good question, because when I first walk into a home and the buyers are not present, I get a feel of the home.
Right.
I get a feel how that homeowner took care of his home
Right.
or her. And I kind of go on from those instincts that I have, and then that allows me to present information to your buyers
That's good.
at a different level.
Right.
Now, when agents come in, they're going to expect everything is perfect most
Yeah.
of the time. And that's okay.
Right.
And the home should be okay.
Right.
Because you've already looked at it.
Right.
So anyway, as a perspective, I just look at everything in general.
So he makes a good point about our interpretation. You know, he's right. We do look at the house from the listing agent side. We look at the house when we come in, usually when we do our listing presentation for newer agents out there. You know, one of the steps that you're told to do is to go in and walk the house and start making notes as to what you think might be some issues in the home itself. Now, we are not experts in the inspection side. None of us, unless you're licensed in one of the particular trades such as plumbing, electrical, roofing, foundation, the guts of the house is what we would call that. You know, we're not going to be making massive opinions of that, but you know, there are some things that we see that we're like, hey, maybe we ought to, you know, ask about this or talk about it. So he's right. We do have some concerns when we go through. Now, 99% of the time when we're walking the house, the seller usually is really good about saying, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And they start sharing their story as to what happened when they went through and looked at this. And then we start forming an opinion as to, hey, look, is this something that's going to be a big deal? A lot of times it's no big deal. I mean, I have some sellers that'll be like, well, the doorknob's really loose. I'm like, that's all right. I'm worried about a lot bigger things than that. And I appreciate those sellers because it shows like a really strong commitment that they're concerned about their house. They care about it. But it's the bigger things where they start talking about, well, maybe we think that the toilet's loose and we've lost some water out of it. And you're like, well, how much water? I mean, is this a seller disclosure issue or is it just an issue where the toilet, you know? So we are going to make an opinion. That was a great point. We are going to start looking at what we think you're going to talk about when you get in there. And I also want to set that stage too, when we are dealing with a buyer or a seller. And this too is important for all the agents out there, especially the newer ones that are really, we have a lot of new agents that watch this show. A lot of people through the Champion School of Real Estate that funnel through and watch for us to learn certain things. You know, we are going to look at, from a buyer and a seller's perspective, we've got to warn them of what we think is going to come. We've got to have some expectations that are set. And one of the most important pieces, I think, of this process in this particular show when it comes to inspections, and it's a common theme I use throughout all my shows and in my own firm, is talking about setting the expectations. If you set the expectations right with those clients, you really should be able to guide what's going to happen when these results come back. But if you say nothing, you open them up to let them make their opinions. And trust me, the general public, many of them are not in a position to form a really good opinion as to what they see on a report. Some of them just go way too, some of them, I've seen some people say, I want everything on the report done. I'm like, that is, you know, look, no offense to anybody that's out there, but if you've ever been one of those people that takes your report and gives it to the agent and says, I want everything, that is just completely unrealistic. That is not what we are doing in here. And you need to hear it. I mean, you need to understand that that actually can hurt the deal when you go out there and you start doing things like that. There are particular things that everybody's looking for. We want the house to be transferred to you in good condition. I don't think anybody wants their house transferred in such a way that it's not going to be what you would expect it to be. But everybody's opinions differ as to what that state is, and that's where we need to all come to an agreement. So you go in there, and all brokers have their way of explaining how they want their contracts negotiated. You know, I've done this for close to 18 years in residential, probably 20 if you count my commercial side in there. With the brokers that I've dealt with in all those years, I have always been of the opinion that most of us agree, and that doesn't mean all of us, doesn't mean this is a set, that this is the way we do it, but most of us agree that it's the things that affect day-to-day life that we're concerned about. If the air condition doesn't work, most people are going to say, that we know that that air condition has to be replaced. If the shower is not working, that's something that we're going to have to address. If the stove is not working, these are things we have to use in the home. Most brokers are of the opinion that those things are very reasonable requests to ask a seller. So when we're doing expectations with the seller, we would tell them, hey, look, if these things come up, we certainly hope that you're going to be in the same line of thought with us. That probably should be something we should fix. And the same thing from the buyer standpoint. We should be telling our buyer, look, that inspector is going to go in there and they are going to make it look like that house is actually falling into the ground when it's not. And when we come back from break, we're going to really talk with Martin about what it is that they're looking for and the things that he sees that usually scares the buyer. But if we set the expectations from the beginning, most of the time we can overcome those types of issues. Most of the time we can be the ones that say, hey, look, you remember how we talked about we were only going to ask for these few things? Well, here it is. And I'm not seeing anything in there that is really concerning me. And I think we ought to ask for this, this, and this. If we've set those expectations correctly, chances are we're probably going to be able to get the repairs the way we think they should go through. And if we have another reasonable, which that's always a weird thing to say, and I hope that we have another reasonable agent on the other end, we're hoping that they're going to be of the same opinion and that we can work together to make this go easier. Because there is no doubt that this part is the most difficult. It's the part that can break a deal down. It can destroy everything that we work for in the negotiation process, and it's just not the most simple thing you're going to do in real estate. Hey, y'all stay tuned. We're going to head out to commercial, but we'll be right back in about 5 minutes or so. All right, when we get back, we'll start focusing more on you going through when you're doing reports. Talk about some of the things that you see that typically cause problems in your career, and talk about the things that are the biggest bother. Talk about the roof, talk about the foundation, talk about the guts.
The majors.
Yeah, let's talk about the guts, and that'll drive just a ridiculous amount of conversation. And, you see what I'm talking about? I always wing the inspection side of it. Just the intro will take you through.
Right.
Yeah, and then you set up for, hey, look, let's talk about the basics inside of it. So I think in this show we definitely want, we don't have time to talk about everything, but let's try to focus in on the guts, and then maybe the differences between what are not guts, like we were talking about earlier, the water pan.
Majors.
Yeah, talk about if there's a foundation, if there's a roof issue, what we know we have to do, and you guys join in. But if there's let's also discuss, and this might be on the second break where we get to this, but let's also let's do that. Let's talk about the guts on this section, and then let's talk about the not so guts on the second part of it. Things like, what if the water pans? Is the drip pan? Is it necessary? Can't the buyer do some of this?
Aren't all the way around.
Yeah, or the
Window
valves
seals.
and
That's the
Well,
major.
it's
broken.
Make sure you talk about seals. Don't forget me
A
that.
lot of it depends on
That's right.
location too. If the water heater's upstairs and it doesn't have a drip pan,
And that's a good point to make.
Yeah.
We demean the process of the water pan because you really don't need it unless
It's in the
unless
it's
attic.
upstairs. But to be fair, if that water thing busts, it's gonna be a mess.
Yeah.
Ain't no water pan's gonna stop it. But at least it gives you a warning.
That's true.
It does give you a warning that, hey, I might be able to put a stop to this before it gets worse.
Well, typically I've found in 30-some years of inspections, water heaters leak at the top.
So when the
and they
pan
slowly
goes,
leak down into the pan,
and so you can tell it's
and
coming
you
in.
can see it coming.
Yeah.
And
The
then
ones you got to worry
repair
about, they just burst
the
completely.
bursting ones. I've had very rare,
Yeah.
very rare.
The water heaters do pretty good. They go a
Yeah.
long time. I mean, I go in houses where I see a water heater, it's a good 20, 30
Right.
years old. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow.
What's with the
Electric.
contract that say, sorry, go ahead.
Electric lasts longer than gas.
I didn't know that.
FYI. So
Interesting.
if you find an electric system, because you got two elements, you can pull those out and put them back and change them
I
out.
didn't know that.
A gas, the gas either goes and you're gone. You got to replace the tank. So there's a lot of options. I like to tell my buyers about tankless and
Talk about it. I
going
love it.
different- yeah.
Now, when we come back, I'll once again focus on your credentials. You can talk, if you want to talk about where you're from or whatever, you do it. If not, just go straight into, I'll leave that up to you. I need to start paying attention to where 5 minutes is at. We're not there yet, but I'm going to put mine on just in case I can still hear y'all too.
How long are the breaks?
What's that?
How long are the
5.
breaks?
So there's a contract, the section where it says the buyer is buying it as is.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, that's
Because one of the agents refused to negotiate repairs with me because he said we checked the as is box.
Yeah. Yeah, it specifically says
Is there
right
a
under there.
major
That's
there?
why it doesn't do that.
Exactly.
Don't let me forget that, though. That's a good one.
I was like, I never had that happen to me before. I was
You know
like,
what I always
shocked.
tell them? I go, that's a great comment. I go, you know why it's so great? They put it right under that one section. They put it reworded that you can ask for this after that. It doesn't mean that it's as is means what you see. If you
Yeah.
know you're going to do, like the carpet. There's no reason to negotiate carpet later. You know it's there. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
You need me to come back, Robert, that's fine.
Hey, you don't know that. I'm not the one that has a problem with that. What do we got up there?
7.
Absolute cheapest prices on U.S. and international airline tickets and hotels. Call right now for prices so low they can't be published. Travel experts are here 24/7 to help. 800-631-1754. 800-631-1754. 800-631-1754. That's 800-631-1754.
Welcome back to Smoker Broker Radio with the owner of Small World Realty, mentor to thousands of real estate agents in the state of Texas, competitive barbecue champion, and self-made entrepreneur. The Smoker Broker himself, Robert Meche.
Hey, welcome back to Smoker Broker Radio. We're continuing our conversation about the most complicated process, or at least in opinion, one of the most complicated part of the housing process is looking at inspections. As we discussed earlier, we have a veteran real estate inspector in here with us, Mr. Martin Cooley. He has seen a ton of things over his time when it comes to inspections, and we're going to kind of pick his brain over some of the things he looks at when he's out there. He's actually going to talk about probably some of the things that scare people the most, and it should be obvious. There are things about discussing the guts of the home and the major things in there, but he's probably going to share with you some things that it's just interesting listening to the buyer sometimes as to how they respond to something or how they move through there. So, Martin, when you go through, and let's first talk about, I might be putting him on the spot here. So what do you think about when it comes to the buyer? Do you like the buyer there the entire time? Do you care whether the buyer's there the entire time, or do you want them to be just for part of the time?
That's
You know what?
of course, Robert, put me on the spot.
Yeah,
That's
look, I'll answer that for him. Of course, he wants you to be there. It's your time frame. You should be there the entire time. Look, they probably want you there. You probably want them at the end to talk with everything, don't you?
Yes, obviously at the end for sure.
Right.
I kind of, since I've been doing this for quite a while,
Yeah.
I kind of like my buyers to be there now.
That's good.
Only because I can massage their shoulders,
Right.
ease them into the process,
Right.
let them hear and see some things that I do,
Yeah.
so they get a better understanding. Because if they don't know what to expect, like you said earlier, they're going to be in a fear mode.
I think they're more comfortable when they get to see what you're doing. I think anytime you show somebody that something they don't know how to do, they're going to pay attention. Now, if it's someone who expertise is in the material, they're probably not as interested. They're probably like, yeah, I would do that too. But if they don't know, I think they probably do need to see you. I always try to tell our buyers, hey, look, he's got some work to do, so, let him go. But you got to be there probably for the last 30 minutes or so. It'll probably help you to be there. I guess I'll be politically correct with the agents out there too. You should be at the inspection, at least at the end of it, to be there with your buyer. Now, I say that hypocritically because I know over the years that I have not always been there. Like I have previous clients that watch me like, well, you were never there. Look, trust me. If the agent's not there, they better be experienced enough to know exactly what that report's going to come off, and they're able to tell it to you. So, if you're at a point where you're comfortable, hey, look, that's up to you. But you really and in most of the years I did, these were people that knew me very well if I didn't go. But I will be hypocritical and say, look, you should be there. You really should.
Most of my buyers want to be at the inspection, and so like you said, I tell them, hey, give them an hour to work and get the majority of the stuff done, but let's show up in the last 30, 45
Absolutely.
minutes and talk about it.
He's got to have some time to get what he needs done. And I think that the buyer can sometimes complicate it if they start talking to him because he really can't concentrate as much because he's having to go back and forth. That can be kind of rough too. But we want there to be some interaction. Banu, do you like to go? You show up at your inspections, don't you?
I
at the end?
definitely do at the very end with them, and I think it gives my buyers a lot of confidence to know that they're with them. Not that they don't trust the inspector. Martin has done several inspections for my clients,
That's good.
and they really trust him. But it's just very, it's better for them if I'm present because if they have any questions or doubts, they can always reach out to me.
I think it just reassures them. There's nothing I can't control when I'm not there on the inspection. I'm going to see the report, and I'm going to be the one that's making the recommendations. But I do think, especially for a first-time home buyer, I think you probably need to be there. I mean, I think you need to be sitting with them. I'm going to take away think. You should be there. If it's a first-time home buyer, you really need to be there. And even the more elevated homeowners where it's their second or third home, you should make a judgment as to, is it that imperative for you to be there? I personally think that it enhances the client experience, especially if you don't know them as well. I mean, if it's a good friend of yours, you probably don't have to be there. But if it's someone who is a stranger to you, I think the more interaction you have, I mean, you don't see these people very often, and I think every chance that you get that you should be in there. So I think it's good to actually be there for the end of it because he is going to talk. Well, I say he, Martin, but he or she out in the industry, for as any inspector out there, they're going to go through, once they're done with that report, they're going to tell the buyer what they find to be urgent issues and maybe issues, and I really wouldn't worry about this, but I'm going to point it out anyway. So they're going to go through that. So, Martin, when we go through, we start going through the inspection, talk to us about some of the things that do scare the buyers. I would imagine it's the guts of the house that really are some concerns. But what are some things over the years that when you get to that point, you're like, hey, I'm worried that this is going to cause a little bit of issue, especially if there really is an issue out there?
Okay, yeah, especially when you want to concentrate on major issues is what I call them now.
Yeah.
Foundation, roof,
sure,
electrical.
Right.
Basically the three costly expenses of repair items that
right.
could be. I concentrate on the foundation.
Sure.
Because that rest of that home, it doesn't mean anything if you don't have a good foundation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cracking in the slabs, everybody's going to see them. So I have to point them out.
So let's talk about that too. That's why I like having this conversation. I used to set agendas when we do inspection. I'm like, it doesn't matter because then we talk about something like this and it breaks into another conversation that's just as important for a lot of people out there. So for buyers and sellers out there who are currently in the process or are going to be soon to be in the process, Martin just talked about something that comes up from our side all the time, and it can be comical at times. People in Texas, they are trained from the beginning. Their mindset is that we are the foundation trouble capital of the world. That's a fact, too. We are. Yeah, we have very hard soil, and we do have quite a few foundation issues out there. But it's amazing what the average person out there on the streets thinks the foundation issue is. Folks, you have to have something really wrong with your house to be causing some foundation issues. Just because you see a spider crack, I literally have had buyers walk out of a house because they're like, oh, it's cracking. I'm like, they all crack. And I go, you're not going to find one that doesn't have it. But special places that you see the cracks that usually really aren't a terrible concern, especially if they're just small. And when we say spider cracks, we're talking about a line crack. The corner walls, anything right next to the window that has just a minor. These are areas that are compressed, over time. They're going to have some pressure. That sheetrock is not cement. It's going to pop just a little bit. You could literally have spider cracks in every single corner wall of your house, and your foundation is completely fine. I'll tell you where we typically start worrying is when we see them go lateral, when we see the crack go lateral, when we see a stair step, like in the mortar. That's a good one too. When we're on the outside of the house and we start seeing. Now, stair step doesn't mean that you have foundation either. But where we really start worrying is when all these other things combined are together, where you see, not only do you see stair stepping, but you also see spider cracks, you also see lateral cracks, you also see separation from the foundation to where the soil is, to where the slab is. It's not just one thing. Like a lot of people start freaking out when the closet door swings open. A lot of houses, if that thing's just off a bit on the hinges, and there's just a slight slope on the way they put it, it's going to swing. It doesn't mean that your house is sinking into the earth. So you have to have a little bit of optimism that this isn't the worst thing ever. On inspections, we see what's some of the other ones. I want you guys to. I'll tell you what they are if you don't. But what about on the outside? What are some things that people pick on that kind of are silly?
The corner
seal.
popping.
The window seals, the corner pop, the exposed rebar. I get that a lot. Oh, we're gonna have to cap that off. I'm like, why? It's been that like for a long time. I go, it just looks ugly. No one's gonna come out to you and say, oh, you have a beautiful rebar out here. I just maybe we should patch this up. I get that all the time too.
The separation of the trim from the garage door.
Hey, that's a good one. So a lot of times when even in my own house, where I might worry sometimes, I'll start looking at, like I not too long ago noticed that I had a little bit of a stair step on the far side that's a little bit where no sun hits, and with a lot of rain, I've noticed a little separation, but I wasn't as worried because I really didn't have any cracks anywhere else. And I did look up and I looked at the trim, and the trim is right on the brick. I'm like, well, if this thing's moving, I go, that thing's surely going to separate before that does. So yes, the trim's a good one too. I spend a lot of time when I'm on the outside of a house. We talked about this a second ago, but the separation to the soil, when you start getting past half an inch, I mean, if you can stick your hand back in there, and if you can make a fist, then you got really things that you should be concerned about. But that's a good indication that it's dry, it's starting to push away, that there's a lack of water over there. Where I really start getting concerned is where I see that, and then I see like the clay is how would you describe it? Like it's not cracked, but it looks like an earthquake happened over there because the soil's so dry, it's starting to push that thing up. So when I see those two things, and then combined with maybe a big like 30 or 40-year oak tree that's sitting right next to the house, I'm like, that thing's probably sucking the water away from this house, and it's causing this issue. But the point is, there's so many things. It's not just one. So I love the window, the cracks issue. You get that all the time. You're like, it's really not that much of a concern, depending on what else. So what else? What are some other things out there that you see?
Sometimes,
go ahead. Get in there, Manu.
the porch or the driveway sometimes has this huge cracks, and my buyers get really worried. I tell them it's not connected to the main foundation, but
pour.
And why? And it's a separate pour. And why is it that the cement outside is cracking more?
It's thinner.
It's thinner, and it's in the exposed horrific heat with not much water on it. We don't typically water our driveway. It's not uncommon to see it kind of just push away a little bit. Driveways are always going to have cracks. Yes, if it's a foot down crack, we probably need to do something about it from a safety standpoint. But even if it's a big crack where it's starting to separate, I'm like, we get that too. Like the garage, oh, there's a bunch of cracks. I'm like, the separate pour is the correct way. It's two different things. I'm not so concerned about it. That's a good one too. What are some other things?
You can get into roofing issues where, based on a 2-story, 1-story home, where you can see some deviation in the structure of the roof cavity itself.
Talk about that. Be more clear to the public. They have no idea what you're talking about.
Rafters, when you're in an attic, and you're standing in there and you're looking up, and you see rafters, ridge boards, things are starting to separate.
Right.
Pull away. When you see the pulling of the rafters from the ridge board, you kind of get a little concerned. But if it's only one area, it's not a major.
Right.
But if it's all the way down the ridge board, you've got something moving either in the front or the back of the home.
So you're talking about the roof from the structure standpoint as to how it's moved across. Most people refer to the roof that they're worried about the exterior side of it, but the roof can also be affected by how those joints are moving. And for those of you that don't go up into your attic a lot, which most of us don't, it's not hard to see a rafter separation. When you get up there and you look, you'll see it. And a lot of times you see the board just hanging. Sometimes the boards just come off. We had one not too long ago where the board was off of it, and it's just kind of dangling in there. So when you see things like that, it becomes obvious, but we don't go up into our roofs all the time or in our attics all the time. So that's a good one. From the interior up, what's the issue with the roof?
When you think about the structure of the home, you got to remember the 2x4s, the walls, and everything is attached to the foundation slab.
That's right. That's right.
So when the foundation slab moves, it's going to pull everything all the way up to the top of the roof.
So that's why your comment a minute ago was great, how really it all starts with the slab, because that piece is the beginning piece to what there can be future trouble out there, right?
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
a good point, too. What are some other things that you like to talk about that bother your buyers, or at least when you get to it, it gets uncomfortable that you're going to have to explain it? we could probably talk forever if we really thought about it.
Yeah, we
but-
can really get into this. I'll try to keep it real simple.
Yeah.
Though. Electrical problems are kind of a concern of most clients.
Yeah.
Based on ages of the electrical panels.
Right.
Of course, during the years, I've learned from day one all the way up to now that manufacturers of certain panels are calling and recalling, and have even stopped manufacturing certain types. So
Right.
we've got to make sure that that panel is grounded, bonded, and safe.
Right.
So that's my major
Right.
look at. There's a lot of Federal Pacific, Sylvania. I can go into that for an hour or two if you want, but I'm not going to. But they just need to be grounded and bonded.
Put
and
what
some
what do
aren't.
you put on the report when you see that? What's your standard language for that, or as
Well,
close as you can get to it?
If I see a Federal Pacific panel, for instance, that have been, they're not making them anymore.
Right.
They're the most fire hazard panel because of what can happen behind the breakers. We
Right.
can't pull the breakers off.
Right.
So I look for heat.
Right.
And I smell for plastic.
Sure.
And even now, I'm getting into scanning the panel with a scan gun.
That's
that
good.
can actually show heat.
I didn't know that.
And so now we're trying to use that technology to enhance and better our inspections. Now, I'm not going to do the whole house,
Right.
but I'm going to do the electrical panel. Because
Well, I mean, if you can smell something at that point, I mean, I think
you
it's a
can
good
smell
indication.
something, I'm calling out an electrician to look at it and reevaluate.
Now, even if you don't smell that, you're still going to not notice. You're still going to document on that report that, hey, these have been recalled.
Yes.
They're not built anymore. And
Federal Pacific, Sylvania, and Zensko panels are fire prone.
right.
So
It
they're-
doesn't mean you're going to have a fire if you have it.
Right.
It just means that it's done it before, right?
It can happen.
And that is what really breaks us into a rougher conversation as to should it be replaced or not. And we certainly don't take surveys of every broker out there, and this show goes from coast to coast and actually across the world too. Everybody has different looks at what they think the panel does, but I got to say, from what I see, there is really starting to become a 50-50 discussion as to should it be replaced or should it not be replaced. And that, when you start getting into 50-50, that becomes a difficult conversation. All right, before we get out, I always our show actually sponsors, our company actually sponsors the show too, so I always like to give a shout out to our company at Small World Realty. About to head to break, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I've been in real estate a long time. I know there are a lot of great choices out there when it comes to real estate brokerages. Small World Realty is home to the smoker broker and is unique in the fact we not only have full-time agents, but we especially focus on part-time agents. If you need a low-cost broker who's available 24/7, insists on ethical practice, and reviews all documents personally before they touch a third party's hands, we are probably a very good fit for you. Another job, just doing it for your own investments, stay-at-home mom and dads, all of that's not a problem. Give us a shout or text at 214-683-8973. You can also check us out at our Facebook page or our website at smallworldrealty.com. You can tell them the Smoker Broker sent you. We're going to go ahead and go right to break. We'll see you in a bit.
Yeah.
What happens when I see on some inspection report that the grounding is missing in the panel, and how serious is that?
Well, you see, because since we can't see it, we have to
Okay.
report that it's possible that the panel may not be grounded or bonded. See, today's electrical panels that are installed newly, they're both grounded and bonded.
Gotcha.
Now, the older homes that were bonded at the cold pipe, which is the water
Correct.
heater cold correct pipe right
Right.
there. You'll see a cable or
Right.
a wire there.
Okay.
That's a bond, or considered a ground back then.
Okay.
But today, it's not considered a ground. It's considered a bond. So there's bonding and grounding are almost the same thing.
Got it.
You
Okay.
gotta be careful how you try to explain it, so that's always good to ask me about. Try not to explain that to you.
Yeah,
Because they're
exactly.
it's gonna go way over their head.
Exactly.
So-
But is it something my buyer should be little worried about?
If there's neither,
Right.
the house is still there, so it's possible that the ground or bond is inside the wall.
But we
And
can't see
they
it.
went to the rebar of the foundation. That's 199.9% of the issues.
I see.
That's why homes are still there. Okay, so a lightning strike, it went to ground, but you still went away. So now we want everybody to see it.
Got it.
And now what they're doing on newer construction today is they're putting 2 grounding rods in. They're 6 feet apart. You have to have 1, 2, bam, bam. Double ground, 10-foot long, solid copper, driven rods into the ground.
I had a client last year, her house got struck by lightning, and an AT&T showed up, right, tried to get the Wi-Fi and everything back up, and he goes, dude, the routing route is not even connected to anything. And then fried 50% for electronics inside the house.
Yeah, so I recommend everybody that has an electrical panel with breakers, put a surge protector system inside the panel.
Yeah.
Most newer panels are gonna start including that, new construction, have a
So
surge
good.
protector, so it goes
Surge
strictly to
So that
ground.
is something that's outside but connected to the panel?
It's something that you have to install if you don't have one. You just call an
It's like
electrician.
350 to 550.
It goes up to 10,000 amps. I mean, they'll protect everything in your house, including your air conditioner, because what happens a lot, if you don't have a surge protector in your panel, the lightning strike hits, it goes to ground, but all of a sudden your AC fries out because the board fries out on your air conditioner. Now you have no cooling and no heating.
We just go around his house.
So surge protectors are coming, they have different prices. You can go from,
Probably need to look at that online.
Yeah, I was thinking.
and have them installed in the panel if you can, if you have the space, because they were gonna be on their own circuit.
You guys are probably okay for now.
We got like 2 more minutes.
Yeah, I'll wave my hand for y'all so y'all don't have to have it. I do it just out of paranoia in case I miss.
So there's a lot of things that we don't even go into the report that clients ask me questions about that are not even associated. But I can give them the information how to protect their own better.
It's like everything you just said earlier, like literally I was zoning out, right? Because all I can remember was like every single deal that, me and Martin gone through. I was like, oh my God, those are a lot of stories.
Oh, it's
I have found so many things. I'm gonna write a book. It's just gonna,
You probably
I'm
should.
gonna compile. I'm in compiling mode now, so it's been about 8 years now. So when my book comes out, I'm gonna try to keep it as simple as sweet as possible,
That's
so
possible.
everybody can understand it. Agent side, inspector side, nobody who's not either an agent or in real estate. And it's hard. It's gonna be difficult. But it can be done.
we don't have to replace anything. Yeah, there's nothing. Just because the code changes doesn't mean we have to change.
That's another good topic.
About the code? You want to talk
Yeah.
about the code?
It doesn't matter.
All right, let's do one. We'll talk about David.
We're not code inspectors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I get a lot of buyers in that's such a good report.
I like when people are watching the show and asking questions. Feels very good.
We need to start encouraging more. Hey, welcome back to Smoker Broker Radio. We were talking at the break. We were going through and discussing how codes sometimes get. In fact, we had a question off Facebook there. Talked about, is there a statute of limitations for replacing something no longer is up to code? So, Martin, you're not a code inspector, are you?
No, not any matter. We're just licensed by the Real Estate Commission to do home inspections.
Yeah, you're just pointing stuff out that could potentially have issues, but that's not what you guys do, right? You're not a building inspector or anything
No.
like that.
No, we're not. We're in code issues. If I know the new codes and I know some issues or some information on them, I just kind of tell them verbally
Right,
what code issues can run into and what they are about.
right.
And so my clients have a better understanding about that. So
Yeah. And a lot of times, too, when you have a code issue, some people, like a good one's the dryer vent being vented to the outside. And Martin, if you know better, let me know, but I can't remember the time frames of when. I want to say it was before 90 that they started. A lot of houses built prior to 1990. It might be earlier than that. Correct me if you know for sure. But the dryer vents into the attic. So all that lint and stuff, it goes into the attic. Well, somewhere along the way, a house burned down because of it. It was probably 1 in a million where it happened, and they changed the code to where the dryer vent has to vent to the outside, which is what more modern homes have now. They're vented to the outside. Now, we have a lot of people, when they see the inspection, the inspector will note, hey, the vent is not, it's not pushed to the outside, and it's not put as an, well, maybe, I don't know, is it an urgent, is that a red for you or is it a blue?
it's not necessarily
Red or blue means red. Something I'm looking at, blue's like,
yeah, fire engines and
Right.
yeah, dolphins. Okay. what you got is basically a tube that's going up through the attic, but it's going up, so lint is going to settle down.
Right.
You got to remember that the point of the dryer contact is in the wall right there on the floor.
Right.
So we recommend highly all the time, every 6 months, clean your vents.
That's right.
Pull the tube off, clean the lint out of there, because that's where the dryer's going to overheat, and that's what's going to happen.
So here, and I love how he presented that. For every buyer out there that insists that they want a seller to drill a hole through their roof or to the external side, that is a great alternative to screwing around with the house. Is just try to get up there and clean that every once in a while. You should know when that thing has a lot of lint in it. One of the or what I'm trying to say, one of the most specific things that makes me look at is sometimes when you go into a laundry room and you can feel the heat pushing in there, and you're like, well, why is there's something off? There's not something off. The thing's filthy, and that heat's not able to push through the vent. So sometimes you'll also see there'll be some condensation on the top, and you're like, why is that there? And then somebody who is more mechanical than you are, they'll go up there and they'll pull out a huge wad that you could probably make a whole blanket out of lint sticking up there. You know how I know that? That happened to me. I'm the one that did that. So if my buddy Jim Roberts is out there watching, God, thank you for everything, man. God, I can't tell you what an idiot I am. But that's one of those things. But in all seriousness, when we're going through the inspection process, we have people that will ask, they insist on it. You're like, come on, that is not what we're trying to do here. But because they were told that, well, it could be a fire hazard, they misinterpret what the fire hazard is. The fire hazard is really, like Martin said, it's really down below that it's going to be an issue. It's not the fact that it's not venting to the outside. It's not like the dryer is shooting fire fumes up into the attic and waiting to hit your, insulation or anything. It's amazing how people look at that and go, oh, this is going to be something terrible. So that gets us into the tail end of our conversations about what is it that somebody's going to ask for? What is it that we want them to ask for? Where do we define as unreasonable, which, no one can say something's reasonable versus unreasonable because everybody has a different opinion as to what that is. But as far as the general rule of thumb goes, we're going to talk about some of the ones that cause us the big issue. So that was one, the dryer vent. We get that a lot where we go back to what we started the show with. Is that affecting day-to-day life? It's not. It's not affecting day-to-day life. We can still go on with our day-to-day lives if the dryer chute is filled with lint or it's not pushing out. I mean, obviously it needs to be cleaned, and we want to be utterly clear. We are telling you really should clean that thing at least once every 6 months or so. That'll avoid any type of issue with that. But, you got people who are asking, it's not affecting a day-to-day life. We talked about windows are a big one. Almost every inspection that's done is going to note, or the inspector's going to note that there's a fogged seal. And, the first thing you need to understand when it comes to a fogged seal is that it's not affecting the home really in one way. There's there's not air that's pushing in and you're losing for the most part, you're not losing massive energy inefficiency. But all it is those things have double panes on them. And one of the things has gotten in there and one of the pieces is broken and it's let a little moisture go inside the window. It doesn't mean that the house is going to flood. It doesn't mean that the house is going to soar your heater bill up. It just, quite honestly, it looks ugly. That's what it comes down to. Go ahead.
Robert, you were talking earlier about setting expectations.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I learned early is that you need to set expectations with your buyer.
That's right.
Because you are looking at the major things, the roof, the foundation, the plumbing, and the electrical.
That's right.
When you signed that contract, you signed it as is.
That's right.
So we're making sure the house is not a lemon and going forward.
Right.
So if you start asking for all these little minor things, you don't like the paint, you don't like the carpet, you're probably going to blow a deal if you're asking for $800 more than you should be.
And I really think that gets us into the final conversations here for the next, 6 or 7 minutes. You read the contract. The contract says that we are accepting the property as is. That is most of the time what an agent is going to select when they are representing a buyer. They are going to put that they're accepting it as is. Now, this language can be very confusing to the general public and for the newer agents out there too. I don't know why I'm saying the newer agents. Some of the agents that have been out there for a while, it's confusing too. I don't know why, because all you have to do is read below and it specifically tells you what it says. But when we're talking about as is as is referring to, when we go in there, these are things that we can see or that we've already been disclosed. If the seller's disclosure already disclosed that there's a foundation issue and it's going to have to be repaired, then obviously if we accept as is, there's an option right below that says we accept as is, but we're going to insist that the foundation be repaired.
Regardless of the cost.
Regardless of the cost. We're telling them it has to be fixed. You know, there are certain things that it doesn't matter. When it's foundation, when it's roof, it's going to have to be fixed, right? You have people that make the assumption, especially, and where this becomes a real problem, and it always flows through with expectations, and I blame the listing agent a lot of times for this because they haven't really pushed it on to their seller and telling them. But they'll start asking for these things, and you're just like, look, you've got to be on the same page with us. There's just no way that we're going to get through this if you're looking and asking for different things than we are.
Especially if there's competition. If there's 4 other people that want the house and you're asking for, money for the carpet to be replaced, you're going to lose that deal.
And look, we all agree that there are things that we can do on our own. It's not that hard for us to replace carpet. Most of the time, I think you'd rather replace the carpet yourself because you don't want somebody else choosing what the color's going to be. And I can also tell you this too. Everybody out there, when you've always asked for new carpet to be replaced and you insisted on it, I'm going to tell you a lot of times you probably got the more lower grade carpet because it's clean and you don't know that it wasn't a higher end carpet versus you putting it in yourself and asking for an allowance on there. Sellers rarely go in there and say, oh, I'm going to put a $10,000 carpet in there for them. That is not how they respond to that. So you should kind of think about when you ask a seller certain things, if you push them too far, the response you get might actually hurt you to some extent. It might actually hurt what they do for you. Some sellers aren't as willing to do things if they feel that they're being pressured or nickel and dimed by certain items, and this is one of them. As is refers to what we see. Now, this is where, from agent to agent, it gets a little dicey, is when we start looking at an agent who selected as is, we get into the inspection process, and then on the repair amendment, they ask that they want new carpet. I'm like, he didn't tell us anything about the carpet. That carpet already, we knew already the carpet was filthy and needed to be replaced. Why are you asking for it now that we've negotiated a price? Because we took all the variables into consideration. Why are you asking for it now? That is considered to usually be a low-down strategy in the real estate process. Now, a lot of agents...
That's where deals fall apart.
Yeah, and the agent will say, well, I have to do what my client tells them to do. I'm like, yeah, because you didn't tell them in the first place.
Correct.
That they should have already asked for that instead of asking for it now.
That's
so
right.
This is where you get the array of agents that are out there that their etiquette sometimes can actually hurt the buyer if they're not advising them the correct way. That carpet was known from the beginning it had to be replaced. There is no reason why we have to wait till we go through inspection to actually put it on there, say we want the carpet done. So these are picky things sometimes.
Sometimes you need to set the expectations as a listing agent too, because
Yeah.
if there's a bunch of competition, you may say, hey, look, if it's not a major thing, we are not doing any repairs whatsoever. Even if it's like a stove or something that needs to be replaced.
And the conversation does change depending on the market. It does give the seller a lot more advantage as to how far they're going to go with repair. And you will really see at that point where a buyer is only asking for a legitimate item. They like, look, the air conditioner doesn't work. This has to work. I got to make sure that this air conditioner is going to be in there. The shower has to work. I got to make sure that I can take a shower when I go in. One thing that I find funny as we start to wrap up here, God, this conversation is so great. We tipped it. We could go for so long on this topic, and I know that too when I set these things up. But one of the funnier sides that we haven't talked about yet, we've talked about really the serious side and the tougher sides and what causes issues. But one of the things in my years that I found funny, and I teach about it a lot too, is when I see a buyer and they're going through the inspection process and they watch the inspector with somewhere like when they're inspecting the bathroom, and the inspector will go through and they'll turn the water on. They'll test to see if the hot and the cold's working. I always have admired the buyer that when the inspector looks at the shower, they turn the shower on and then they turn it off. I've always admired the buyer that goes in right behind him and turns it on again and does like this, because there is nothing worse, especially when you move to Texas in the summer and you spend your first day, you're moving, you're just exhausting yourself. You're going through everything and you finally get done and you get up to where you're ready to take a shower, and you just really, it's your first shower in your new house, and you just can't wait to get in there. And you get in the shower and you turn it on, and you get, and that's like for those of you out there on the radio, that's just like where the shower drips. There is nothing more infuriating than a shower that drips, and it does. Most people like the paint to be peeled off of them when they go through. All right, look, we want to thank everybody out there. I want to thank our viewers and listeners. I want to leave you with this. Life is way too short to be unhappy. If you feel trapped in the corporate world or in a dead-end job, or just want something new, then do something about it. Be innovative, disciplined, have a strong work ethic, and most important, have a good attitude. You will find all these traits are every successful business owner who comes on this show. The world is always looking for the next great idea. There's no reason it can't be you. Till next time, you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. We'll see y'all next week.